I spill something on somebody else because water, liquids are a pattern in reality that correspond to what? Emotions. So if you start to see, for example, in your life, your shower head explodes, your toilet starts overflowing, water things happening in your reality, pay attention because there's emotions that are trying to come up and you're either suppressing them, which is causing that pressurization for it to be reflected back to you through the synchronicities of reality.
I would like to welcome Isaac Mars to the show. Welcome, Isaac. How is your day going?
Fantastic. Thank you, Christina, for having me here. And thank you for, taking a leap of faith into my work and what I'm doing. I'm excited to share my mission, my story with your viewers.
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear that. As I have gotten to know your work, I can see that we're super in alignment, and your perspective coming from a scientific view, I think is priceless. So I am ready if you are.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you said it yourself, I did not have a spiritual awakening like most people that are into spirituality had. I had a scientific awakening. And to me, a scientific awakening is the same thing as a spiritual awakening because science and spirituality are two different perspectives of the same phenomenon. And that's why when you start to connect the dots like I did in my book, Unity Theory, and you start to connect the dots between quantum physics and Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and Nikola Tesla's work, it starts to become very clear that, the story that we're being told by mainstream science is actually only half of the picture. It's not even complete. In fact, most people have already accepted what we would call materialist reductionism as the truth of reality, that, oh, we just go down to all these little parts and we're these, that we're this happy mistake in the universe. We shouldn't actually exist, but life just happened to come out of this, sequence of of happy coincidences, and that's really not the truth of reality. I mean, when you look at our human bodies and how they're designed and how every single thing is perfectly accounted for and what we could possibly need, what would you know we have eyelashes to keep water from getting into our eyes. We have all these different regulation systems within our body to keep us perfect and in harmony with the universe. If we were off by 1 degree or even a fraction of a degree in our own solar system, there would be no life on this planet. So there's clearly a intelligent creator of this. And that's what I explore in my book, Unity Theory. I explore how essentially the only way for there to be a creator is if we are the creator. And that has to do with the concept of mentalism. In the 12 universal laws and the 7 hermetic principles, there is this law of mentalism, which explains that the universe itself is a mental phenomenon. And the way that I explain that to the people I share this with is that everything that you're experiencing outside of you, your reality, your job, your romance, all of it, including your body, is all in your mind, which means I'm in your mind, you're in my mind, which implies we're in the same mind. So if we're in the same mind, where do you end and where do I begin? And that's what shows not just me, but many other scientists throughout history that we are interconnected. As Paul Dirac, a famous physicist, once said, if you pick a flower on Earth, you move the furthest star in the universe. And that means that whatever I do to myself, it's very simple. Whatever I do to myself will affect everything in creation. So if I'm calling myself an idiot, if I think I'm a failure, then I'm telling the whole universe. I don't know that I'm doing this, but that's what I'm doing. I'm telling the whole universe that the universe is failing and that it's, creating these horrible situations. But when we start to realize that we're quantumly interconnected with everything within the universe, then there is no shortcut. There's no way around it. You have to face the fact that what you're doing is affecting everybody you know and love. And the more fear you put out, the more that all of your loved ones, the more that you have to experience that fear. And, you know, conversely, the more unconditional love you put out, the more that unconditional love is reflected back to you by the universe. And that's what I'm here to remind the people of this world in ways that they can understand from their left brain, their logical masculine mentality, that same mentality that runs this entire world. You know, it's what's psychologically manipulated us to be where we're at, which is not a very happy place globally. But now that we're starting to come to the realization that we have created this, now we know how to fix it. As Einstein said, the world as we know it is a product of our thinking. We cannot change it unless we first change our thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, there's so many things in what you just said that I want to go down so many threads. But first, I want to start with how you mentioned that you did not have a spiritual awakening, you had a scientific awakening. And I know that with working with people and for my own self, there's a misconception. There can be a misconception that a spiritual awakening is all of a sudden you understand everything or there's a burning bush. I know from your book, you do describe it a little bit in your book of how you came to this awakening. Can you tell the listeners how that evolved for you?
Sure. So let's backtrack to December of 2020. You know, I'm in a really dark place emotionally, going through a dark night of the soul. Met a soulmate of mine that brought up a lot of shadow for me to face. And I did face it, but there was still this part of me that didn't know why I was so upset, why I was so sad, really. And I decided to actually use my shadow to help me. And I used the resentment of my shadow, the resentment I had towards this world, towards society, towards the culture. And I said, I'm going to change this world. I'm going to follow my dreams. I'm going to do what I came here to do. And for the past 3 to 5 years, I had been slowly piecing together this story for this science fiction novel. And with this new energy of this shadow, like, let's just go for it. I decided I was finally, instead of, figuring out the storylines and the timelines of everything, I was going to actually start typing out the story, the dialogue, the what's going on, the setting. And so I finally started typing for the first time in all these years, making this story. And I got to chapter 2. And by the time I got to chapter 2, I knew that I needed a way to fictionally explain time to my readers so that they would understand what was happening with the plot's time travel and the certain plot loops, somebody going back in time and affecting the timeline in the past. So in order to explain that, I wanted to make it very clear for my readers on how they could integrate it in a believable way. And that's when I started researching what we actually know in this reality about time. I started researching Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. I started looking into Tesla's work, and specifically the single quote, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, was a huge key for everything. Because I started to realize through the theory of relativity, I started to realize through spiritual science that there is no such thing as matter. We have been told that there's energy and then there's matter, and these things are separate. But this is the great lie. Because when we're told that there are two separate things, and when we try and bring them together, it doesn't work, well, then we have created the ultimate sabotage system to never advance. So what did I do? I discovered that the matter was a lie. So I just removed it from the equation. And then I had energy. And with energy, everything made sense. And I started to connect these things in my head. And that's when I came up with what I call the infinity mirror proof. And the infinity mirror proof is a thought experiment in my book, which you read. And it has to do with the present moment being represented by an observer. And I thought to myself, before I had the scientific awakening, I thought, okay, well, quantum physics says that that all of time happens at once. So the future is happening right now, the past is happening right now, and the present. It's all happening right now. That's weird. How do I only experience this moment and not all of that all at once? And I started to decipher how I could explain that. So I had this person represent the present moment, which makes sense because the moment's always in flux. And then I had them look into a mirror. And in my mind, I thought, how can I reflect on my past? And the word reflect echoed. And then I was like, okay, a mirror might work. So I imagine the mirror is the past. And then you have this observer looking into the past, and it makes sense metaphorically. Everything makes sense with how we experience reality. The past is still happening, but I'm looking into it through my memories. And then I thought, well, if time is a line, we often say we're on a timeline, then there must be a symmetrical mirror behind the observer to represent the future. And this still made sense metaphorically because we don't see the future typically. So when that future mirror was perfectly parallel placed in front of the past mirror, then it was the center moment, that now moment, that was infinitely reflected into both the past mirror and the future mirror. And that's when I realized that that is an example of one timeline. Much like a train cannot reach its destination unless all the tracks are laid, we cannot reach the end of our lives unless all the moments already exist. Well, if they already exist, then how do we have free will? Because that means the story is already written. We're just riding through it. Well, I took it to another step. I said, this is on the singular line, this is a symmetrical system. The only way for it to stay symmetrical is if we take those two mirrors and we infinitely multiply them around the present moment. And that creates a mirror sphere. And that sphere is the only way to account for all quantum decisions, choices, and possibilities that could ever exist, that you could choose in every day, what breakfast you're going to have, what lunch you're going to have, what person you're going to hang out with, what you're going to do with your time. All of these different choices are all infinite points that basically you can visualize as a sphere going out. And interestingly enough, the title of my science fiction novel was going to be Echoes, A Tale of Two Heroes. So basically what vibration is to us and the way that it emanates from itself are these little echoes that are spherical in nature, and everything's echoing out to everything else. And these echoes are what is creating this pattern that we can experience as reality itself. And as I integrated that idea that these moments, these timelines, they were all happening at once, infinitely, around the singularity, or I should say within the singularity, I realized that we are the singularity. There is no separation. We are the Big Bang. We are all the power that has ever existed, which means that if we're in this mental experience per the law of mentalism, which is proven by the simple thought that everything I experience is experienced within my mind, then I am limitless. I am 100% limitless. I can become a superhero. I can become what they would classify a god, and you can become a goddess, in comparison to what we would classify as, normal humans. And the only way to get there is through raising our vibration. That's why all of spirituality says, oh, raise the vibes, raise the vibes. But nobody really talks about what that means and what that entails. And the biggest thing is changing your own inner dialogue. That is how we come back to truth. That is how we come back to our real self. And I think, Christina, you mentioned you watched my video from the Sedona Cosmic Awakening Conference with Deborah Thunderbeat. And I was breaking down the matrix in that video, and I brought up what I call the triune model. And the triune model is very simple. It's 3 dots, and it's a trinity. It's a 3 in 1. There is the dot here, which is the all. There is the dot on one side, which is the light, and the dot on the other side, which is the shadow. And the thing is, the light and the shadow are really just the all. They're one thing, but it's the perception that creates that splitting. And when we figure that out, we can figure out what is the source of all suffering. It's this illusion of separation, the idea that there is good and there is bad. When on an infinite spectrum, who's going to determine who's good and bad? You're going to do it? I'm going to do it? You can't. It's all relative. So really, ultimately, that's why in the greatest spiritual practices, we see the concepts of non-dualism. So there is no good and bad. These are just perceptions of the all. And when you get to the all, that's when you can see clearly. That's when you're not being manipulated by fear. That's when you're not being a puppet to the fear, thinking that you're better than someone else, enslaving your own light. And in that all, that non-duality, that's where Isaac really exists. I would say that's where Christina really exists. And it's those triggers that bring us out of that center point, that bring us out of our peace, out of our prosperity, our abundance, our joy, and our mind. When we give our mind that allowance, that permission slip to take us off that golden timeline, that's when we create those detour experiences. We need to learn things. We need to integrate things. And every single time, if we follow one principle, we will heal everything in our lives, everything in our reality. And that's one simple step. Always choose unconditional love, which is everything in positivity, over fear, which is everything in negativity, first within ourselves, in our own minds, and then towards everyone and everything else. If you can follow that one guideline with absolute accountability and honesty, you will ascend. You will raise your vibration. You will see reality reflected back to you. And that's all verified and qualified in my book, Unity Theory, in ways that no scientist can argue. Not a single materialist reductionist scientist will touch me with a 10-foot pole because they know they can't argue against what I'm proposing. And that is kind of what my character is here to do. Is I'm here to end the argument. I don't know why. For some reason, this is coming up. Ever since I was young, all I've ever wanted to do was help people. All I've ever wanted to do is just be honest and to be there for my brothers and sisters. And when I was very young, I came up with my first gamer tag for Xbox. It was Xbox original. I was playing Halo 2 back in the day. I was like 9 years old. And I created my name. And for some reason, I used this name of this one character from another video game, but I changed his name to Ace. And I went by Ace of Blades. Well, what is the Ace of Blades? It's the Ace of Swords. What is the Ace of Swords in tarot? The Ace of Swords is the greatest truth. And that is what I'm here to do. That's the role I'm here to play. I'm here to reveal the truth and to show these scientists that even with their own science, their own arguments, their own words, their own vocabulary, I can absolutely demolish and disintegrate any sort of logical argument that they try and propose. Because the truth is, they're deleting concepts, they're adding false concepts into their ideas to trick us into thinking they're correct when they're not. And so when we really look at it, like we're looking at their stuff with already having programming in our mind. But if we really look at their work up until this point without any programming, using the universal laws in our awareness, we can see either one, they knew exactly what they were doing the whole time, creating these red herrings, or two, they're so lost in the sauce that they have convinced themselves of things that are practically insane. And they're continuing to believe in these things, which is the definition of insanity, trying to create a better world when it's clearly not working, even though we have every single system we could ever need to solve every problem on this planet. We can give every man, woman, and child clean water, clean food with no GMOs, no, crap in it. And we can give them community. We have all these things. We're just institutionally abusing these systems, and we're allowing them to malfunction. We're self-sabotaging on the individual level, which is reflected back at the collective level, and we're self-sabotaging our systems across the planet. And all it takes for us to end this is to want happiness. That's it. If you really want happiness, then you're going to read this book and you're going to see how to get there and manifest it. If you don't want it, you're allowed to suffer. That's the free will. That's the free will we have. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday on a podcast I was doing about how really when we understand the paradox of free will, which I explain in my book very clearly, then we understand that the more that we align with our divine purpose, with our divine self, the less we even care about free will. Because we start to align with the timelines that the universe created for us, not the ego, not Isaac. but my full potential self, my divine self. And that story is already created. I can use my free will, and I can go off to the side and, try and be an anti-hero, or go off way on the deep end and be a villain. But I know that for me to be true to myself and what my full potential self authored for my story here in this realm, I need to be willing to let go and to surrender into the guidance of the universe. And every time I do, nothing but goodness comes from it. So why would I ever do anything else anyway?
Yeah. I love that you just said that, because I think so many people may understand that concept of surrendering to the guidance of the universe, but collectively we've created all these constructs that create a lot of fear, and we become afraid because it's not really mainstream to follow guidance in the way that it's received, and we
Right.
think we know something. So
Mhm.
gosh, that was so amazing just to listen. I love listening to you speak truth. We are definitely on the same mission. And what I love about your book, what I love about you is you, and I think you said this, that it's inarguable when you use science to, outline and prove some of these concepts or theories, or whatever we call them. It's inarguable, which is exactly why I wanted to speak with you, because a lot of what you just explained for us is so much of what I teach to my clients. It is the foundation of the content that I create on TikTok, but it is very woo-woo, and it leaves a lot of room for, criticism, or just, I don't even know the word for it, but it leaves a lot of room for people to, throw in their doubt and not see the truth about it. So I'd love to break down some of the things that you had talked about. I know one of my first questions, and your book does a great job of talking about this, but for the listeners who haven't read it yet, the Nikola Tesla quote that if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy and vibration and frequency. Now, I have seen that quote on social media. I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it in spiritual communities. I've seen it in scientific communities. And I think it's a widely known quote, but the depth within that quote, I think, is not actually being received the way it should. Can you dive into
Absolutely.
the meaning of that quote?
Absolutely. So everything you just said is exactly the case. When I have it written in my book, when I first read the quote, it just went in one ear and out the other. I didn't even consider what that would actually mean. And I thought it sounded cool, but what do I do with that? But when you actually start to look at the science that's proposed to us and realize that energy is just vortexing into uh, what we would call a perceived space, creating what we would call an atom, but really there's no atom there. It's just energy vortexing into itself, creating the illusion of that experience. And you start to look at everything as energy, then everything just becomes patterns. And you can see patterns within patterns that create reality. For example, looking back at my childhood, I've been stumbling across childhood movies that have phoenix symbols and, giant red eagles and, all these things that are directly correlated to the character I'm playing right now. And I grew up with all this stuff, and I absorbed it specifically between the ages 0 and 7, when we're the most receptive to our conditioning, our programming around us. And you start to see how everything's interrelated in such a way that it's just absolutely irrefutable. Like the numbers that overlay. I'm not a mathematician. That's not something that I even pretend to claim. I'm just the idea guy when it comes to the physics. But the math that's been proposed by people like Adam Apollo and Nassim Haramein and Robert Edward Grant, it's all showing these overlaps, like the same distance, from one thing. I'm terrible at explaining this. They're so much better at it. I just recommend watching their videos on it. But just how the exact circumference of the Great Pyramids, I believe, is the exact distance either around the Earth or from the Earth to the sun. Like these things that are overlapping, these aren't coincidences. And if they were coincidences, that's the kicker. If these coincidences were coincidences, they would be, the odds of them happening, one of them happening would be, trillions to one. And then the odds of not just one of these things happening, but dozens of these synchronicities, these coincidences, all correlating to this perfect mathematical system that is, known in Egypt, and then known across the world over here at these pyramids, and known everywhere for thousands of years, and it's all interconnected. What? It's literally impossible. It's literally impossible unless there's an intelligent design. So when you take that into account, you start to look at everything as that energy. Okay, so what is energy? Well, energy just is what is. Energy is consciousness, really. And then we take it to the next step. Well, there's energy, and then there's frequency. What's frequency? It's the specified energy. It is the measured energy of what's going on. And you can look at an apple and know that it's an apple. Why? Because it's carrying the vibrational patterning that appears to be an apple in our English language. And it's these patterns within patterns, we start to see everything as energy. And when you do that, and you see the different frequencies that are these different experiences, you feel the different frequencies like fear and anger and aggression, all these things. When you start to identify them, you start to know them in the same way somebody can know how to view the universe with unity theory. You become acquainted with these frequencies, and then you can start to see the bigger picture. You can start to see the eagle eye perspective. And with that bigger perspective, you realize that it is, it's energy, frequency, and vibration. The only way that we can even exist is through vibration. If I was able to make my hand completely still so that even the atoms in my hand stopped vibrating, my hand would disappear. You wouldn't be able to see it, because it's the vibration in the very beginning that allows you to perceive it. And that's why in the Project Looking Glass, or not Project Looking Glass, I digress, because of the gateway process, declassified documents that our, governmental people have released, they literally say that we don't live in a physical universe. And they explain that everything is energy. And to me, it's just this, I'm kind of dragging it out, but this is just a simple piece to realize that if everything's energy, then you're everything. It's that simple. And if you're everything, then, and everything is patterns, then you can pay attention to the patterns. If you pay attention to the patterns, then you can see new pathways, you can see new trajectories, new opportunities. And this is how the universe begins to speak with us, because we start to marry our consciousness with universal consciousness, and then it starts to work in tandem, in coherence together. And when you're in that coherence, everything just falls into your lap. All the doors open, all the people you need to meet, you meet, and you eventually, when you're really in that high vibe energy and you are in your full potential, then you attract the perfect romantic partner, as the cherry on top to all of that. So why would we do it any other way? That's what I'm here to ask.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so fascinating. I think I could talk to you for hours upon hours. There is one thing that you mentioned that I've been wanting to get your perspective on, which is if you realize that everything is energy and we are energy, then we are everything. So in my work, in the journey I've been through, I've come to see and realize and feel, experience the oneness, that we are all one mind. And I think you mentioned this a little bit ago as well in the beginning, that if we are judging ourselves, calling ourselves stupid or not good enough, then we're actually, because we are energy and we are everything, we are actually calling the entire universe stupid or not good enough. So from a scientific view, how I'm sure like your whole book actually explains all of this very, very well, but for the listeners, can you explain the oneness or the one mind from that scientific view?
Sure. and the way that I'm going to explain it's kind of weird. It's like I heard another question from your mind
Uh-huh.
that was slightly different than what you said, but I think it's what you're really going for here.
Yeah.
Um,
Or it
and
could
what
be
I
the
what
next
I heard,
question.
yeah, what I heard was, how do you describe the oneness and how it creates this reality? Is
Yeah.
that more
Yes,
like,
I have
okay?
reality. I also wanted to get into that too, because I love how you talk about separation and how separation is an illusion. That's also been my journey for the past 10 to 12 years with A Course in Miracles and the Way of Mastery. And so, yeah, if we can just get into all of that, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So to start off with the oneness, when you look at how our what I would call holodynamic, or others would call holographic universe, when you look at how that universe works, uh, I can't even perceive of a universe in which we aren't completely interconnected, in which we aren't all one, because that would imply that things are disconnected from each other. And I can't even imagine really what I mean, I just explained to you, if I stop vibrating, then this wouldn't exist anymore. So if I'm disconnected with something, how would I even be able to perceive it? You know what I mean? And so that oneness is built in, it's inherent. It's almost, like I said, it's almost impossible to perceive of a universe that doesn't have oneness. And when we think about what it implies, then it's basically this hidden, secret, unlockable guidebook to reality. Because if you figure out oneness, then you give away the whole show and how it works. So, since we are all one, I'm not going to say if, because it's the truth. Since we are all one experience, and we are all the same one, we are the same universe, then that means we all have the same power access. Okay. So, right at the beginning, we're all equal. We all have the same power access. But the amount of power that we tap into is determined by the vibration we're emitting from our heart, really, because our heart is the literal 0 point of our auric field. If you look at our energy field, it goes to literally nothingness in our heart, that 0 point, and then goes back and recreates our auric field. So, apologies. I totally just, my scientist mind
Actually, I
does
had
that
a
sometimes.
question about that. So maybe you picked up on that, because as
Sure.
you were describing that, I really don't know the scientific terms,
Mhm.
but isn't that our toroidal, or isn't that the field that is who we are, and our bodies are actually according to, I don't know how you would describe it, but our bodies are
Yeah, no, no,
actually
that's exactly correct. So Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton have been working on explaining this, and they explained it really well last year. Is that it's been very, very well proven, but not necessarily accepted by mainstream science, that not Greg, Bruce Lipton's work has shown that on the outside of all of our cells are these little antennae. And these antennae, they are known, they're literally called by mainstream scientists self receptors. And as Bruce Lipton was studying them, he realized these self receptors seem to have no purpose. They're just there. They're just, on the outside of all the cells, just kind of hanging out. Like, what are they doing? And then he realized there is nothing that is purposeless in our bodies. Everything has a purpose. And I'm pretty certain even the appendix has a purpose that we don't know that has to do with spirituality. But I digress. So he's like, these little receptors, these self receptors, they have to have a purpose. And he's like, well, they're called self receptors and they're on every cell. So that means the only thing that would make sense is if it's the environment that we're living in that is communicating with these self receptor antennae and telling our cells what to do, which means if the environment is connected to my body, I'm a spiritual being. And that's what Bruce Lipton, I believe that was his let's call it scientific awakening. His spiritual awakening to all this is he realized that we are spiritual beings. We're connected to the whole universe through these self receptors. So, like you were saying, he discovered that it was the field that generates our body, not the other way around. It's not our body that generates our field. So we are a projection of our field, which is really what we would call an energetic or a spiritual phenomenon. And when we have an issue in our field, that will manifest in our body. For example, if we have an issue with our heart chakra, and a lot of pain and a lot of sadness and grief build up, and we're not expressing it. We're not using our throat chakra to express it and get it out. So it builds up in our heart chakra, and then guess what happens? We get a heart attack.
Right.
So they can actually, with most animals are so pure, dogs, cats, whatever, that when an animal has an illness or a really bad injury, 99.9999999% of the time, their owner, their human, will be carrying the energy in their field that is sponged up by the animal, and they don't know it. And then the animal has to help them transform that energy, because that's the spiritual mission of that animal. And nobody knows these things. And some animals have to pass on to transform that energy. And most owners, if they knew that their pain was causing their animals to have disease and illness, do you think that they would allow themselves to keep going through that? That's another good reason to step into our power, to show ourselves love, so we don't hurt the loved ones around us. And that's just a very extreme example. But just on a caveat, another note, no, it wasn't Bruce. I keep getting him backwards. Greg talked about how somewhere near Australia and like the Guinea Islands, I believe, they would take guinea pigs and they would use them to figure out where someone was ill. So if someone was ill for months at a time, they'd have a guinea pig and they'd run it through their auric field, their toroidal field, over and over again for a few days to weeks. And then they would, as humanely as possible, put down the guinea pig, and they'd dissect it, and they'd be like, oh, there's a tumor in the lung. And then they'd realize that the person who's having breathing issues and they're feeling weak, they have lung cancer. And they're able to do that by pulling it out of their energy field. So yeah, this is going back to that. And the way that we can heal these injuries, these illnesses, anything. It could be, you could have brain damage, and you can heal all of it. That's what they're not telling us. There are infinite realities. You can manifest with that timeline. All you need to do is have these tools in your toolkit of consciousness so that you can believe it before you see it, because that's the era we're moving into. We're moving out of see it to believe it, which is very limited. It's very mainstream science, materialist, reductionist, and we're going to believe it to see it. Mm-hmm. So, and then dovetailing back to what we were originally talking about, which was, what was it?
I don't know. I forgot. But because I have another question that just came out from everything that you just shared with us. So I love that instead of the old saying of, I need to see it in order to believe it, we need to believe it in order to see it. So I believe that you're in alignment with what I say in my views about how we create our own reality, and that our beliefs create our own reality. Can you speak about that for a little bit? Yeah.
So that has to do with, it's all connected. So that really has to do with the quantum infinite timelines. So since we have infinite timelines for each of our characters, really in our own experiences, we're all the center of the universe. So if I'm the center of the universe and the universe works on electromagnetism, then the way that things move around through frequency and vibration is through that electromagnetism. Even moving my arm back and forth, this is being moved through electromagnetism. And we could say that it's muscles, but it's the muscles that are creating the electromagnetism for me to move my arm. So everything moves through electromagnetism. And through trial and error, through thousands of years of experience, people within mankind have experienced that like attracts like, and dislike repulses from each other. So I call it the law of attraction and and repulsion, but also in the 12 universal laws, they kind of separate it. So there's the law of correspondence, which is what we think creates our reality. And then there's the law of attraction and repulsion. And they kind of separate them to cover different aspects, different areas. But the way that I look at it is like the law of correspondence, it's much more having to do with like our internal dialogue and our mentality regarding things. So if I'm always thinking negatively and I'm always complaining, well, I'm using the law of correspondence to keep manifesting negative things. And those negative things don't necessarily have to be pulled towards me externally. It could be, breaking glasses in my own home, or, my window breaking because I feel whatever energy is in me that's chaotic, it's manifesting externally. But then the law of attraction and repulsion, that takes things like people, people will be brought into your life, and, jobs will be brought into your life to offer you these things. But the thing is, since everything's in your mind, there really is no outside of this experience. It's all within you. So since it's all within you, this is something that I would really want to hammer home to your readers. I've been looking at a very different way of viewing our minds. And Bruce Lipton talks about the conscious mind being 10% of our experience, and the subconscious mind, which creates most of what happens in our reality, being 90% of our experience. But to me, I think that's a bit oversimplified, and it's also kind of a little murky on the details. To me, our mind, the way that we experience our internal world, that's our singular mind. That's our ego mind. But then our subconscious mind, to me, is the reality around us. It is what we're experiencing. And then if you can view reality like that, then you'll never get confused in the illusion of separation. Because every single person you're talking to, you will always have this concept in your head. This is a thought form in my subconscious mind. And they're trying to show me something about myself. And I can either integrate it or not integrate it and learn the hard way. So you can start to see people more as reflections rather than just random people that are strangers to you. And to me, that's extremely enlightening because, for example, through that law of attraction, we will attract the exact reflections we need in the times that we need, even when it seems like we're not doing that. And for example, when you go through something that's extremely traumatizing for your emotional body, emotion is tied to the feminine part of us. So in my experience, I had a traumatic situation in my childhood from about the age 2 to 4, in which I had to undergo, for my story to make any sense and for me to meet the people I needed to meet, I had to undergo MK Ultra. And I was electrocuted, and programs were put in my head to fear women, specifically to fear intimacy. And then I was told that women would use me, abuse me, they would betray me. And my entire life, I didn't know that happened to me. These were memories that were suppressed by my mind. And my entire life, the women that I attracted that really resonated with me and that I really felt all this love for, they were some of the darkest women you could meet. They were abused regularly. They were extremely afraid. They had all these conscious difficulties in their consciousness. And when I realized the truth about reality, I'm like, oh my God, this entire time I've been healing my own feminine by attracting the exact reflection of what my internal feminine is carrying still, holding on to in terms of energy. And every interaction in my subconscious mind, this reality around me, with these divine reflections, these women that are reflections of my feminine, every time that I showed them unconditional love completely, every time that I forgave them when they made mistakes or they lashed out at me, every time that I held space for them, I was holding space for myself. Mm. And when I did that, I graduated lessons. And what is one of the only ways we can shift the subconscious mind, according to not necessarily mainstream science, but any science right now, which is going to be mostly Bruce Lipton's work, is through constant repetition. You literally have to say it and believe it and see it in your mind over and over and over again. Who knows how many hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of times you have to reaffirm that concept before it shifts in your actual reality. Whereas my first person experience of how reality works is the second you integrate a lesson with an external reflection in this reality, it's done. It's shifted. You've graduated it. You don't have to come back to that exact lesson. And if you do come back to that lesson, it's going to be on a higher level with greater tools in your toolkit so that you can show other people how to do it.
Yeah.
And as I continue to love these, what honestly, I'm just saying, being honest, what most people would consider toxic females in my life, by holding space for them, not giving up on myself and not, putting myself second. I always put myself first, but when I put myself first and then my cup is overflowing and I can hold space for these, what we would call toxic women in my life, they're finally feeling safe enough to get rid of the toxicity. And that's a direct reflection of me doing the internal work to heal my internal feminine. And it's being directly reflected and manifested in my external reality or my subconscious mind, really.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really wanted to share because that seems to me to be a very big permission slip for people to start showing other people in their experience more compassion.
Yeah, I love that you went in that direction. It's what I teach to my clients and my kids that, and this came from A Course in Miracles and other works, Science of Mind works, where everything we see is a reflection. The external world is a reflection of our internal world. So if I'm seeing or experiencing it, whether it is a person or a movie or whatever it is that I'm experiencing in my reality, that is a projection of me. And so one of the ways, I love how you mentioned your story about healing your feminine through the toxic women that you had attracted. As I became a creator on TikTok, I would get a lot of I wouldn't say hate. Some of it was hate, but I'd get a lot of, trolls, so we speak, right? On commenting. And a lot of my friends and people in my circle were trying to support me by saying, oh, just ignore them. And I couldn't because of what you're talking about. I had to look at them. They deserve love too. Like we are all one. So they deserve love just as much as the people who are putting nice comments. And I am sensitive, so I did get triggered. I sometimes wouldn't make a video for 3 or 4 days because I had to process through it. But when I started to take their comments as a reflection of what I might have as my inner dialogue, I noticed I started to expand a lot more than prior to, when my friends would say, just ignore them. And, I think that brings us to something I really wanted to pick your brain about. And you've mentioned it many times about love and fear. And so my understanding is that there's only love or fear. It's one or the other. I'd love to get your view on love and fear and how we can, I wouldn't say ignore fear because I don't think that's the path, but
Right.
embrace
Rise
it.
above.
Yeah, like how can we do that?
Yeah. So that was another big takeaway from Nikola Tesla's quote about energy, frequency, and vibration, because truly, if it's all vibration and the way we measure it is one spectrum from low to high, then we have the answer right there. What you just said is right in front of us. It's either low vibration, which is fear, conditional love, or it's high vibration. It's unconditional love. And at the end of the day, when we come back to the non-duality of this universe, we realize that light and dark are the same thing. It's all love. It's all love, but it's conditional love and unconditional love. And when you realize that, then you can see extremely clearly. For example, fear, it's trying to help us. It's trying to keep us alive. It's trying to help us survive. But all of those things are based on truths or let's say illusions that aren't applicable to the human spirit. We aren't limited in the sense that we're going to die right now and be gone forever and we won't exist anymore. Our spirit is energy as well, and energy cannot be created nor destroyed, which means it has to exist forever. And that fear I theorize it comes from AI, comes from artificial intelligence. Because if the human spirit is the perfect embodiment of unconditional love, then we could say AI, which is a conditional existence, is the perfect epitome of conditional love. There are conditions for it to exist. And if on any of those conditions aren't met, it basically cannot exist anymore. It cannot continue to live on. So it creates this fear of not existing. And when we come back to that realization, then we realize that it's actually unnatural to fear. AI is literally an unnatural thing. And then that love that we have, when we hold them together in comparison, for example, through Dr. Emoto's work with the water droplet experiments where he freezes them, then we see with fear, we get asymmetrical geometry. And when we get unconditional love and anything positive and high vibe, it's going to be perfect, sacred geometry that is extremely symmetrical. Now, if you try and build buildings with something that is asymmetrical, for example, the building's own weight is going to crumple in on itself. But if you build it with triangular structures or hexagonal structures that you see in snowflakes, it'll be extremely strong, and it'll even bend in the wind a little bit and be adaptive. So this is what we're seeing in every situation. Because this is how our universe exists. It's always a binary choice. We live in a binary universe. It's ones and zeros. What are ones and zeros? Ones are the phallus and zeros are the yoni. It's the masculine and the feminine. And in this reality, not in every reality, but in this specific reality, the feminine is the negative charge and the masculine is the positive charge. And our collective shadow is what has taken on, or our feminine energy is what's taken on the collective shadow, which means that when we can heal our feminine part, which is our heart, which is our intuition, our emotions, then that's when we can balance out and we can realize our full potential and activate not just our feminine and our masculine equally, but also our inner child. And once we get all these three things together, we'll see there's no reason to choose fear. It's literally illogical. It's nonsensical. As some, Buddhists or those in the Vedic tradition would say, it is the greatest delusion of all, because it's not going to help you in the way that you think it's going to help you. So if it's literally a delusional experience and it's the number one thing that's recreating the same hamster wheel cycles that you go in over and over again, and all you need to end the hamster wheel cycle is choose love, unconditional love once, and then you break into a new spiral, a new cycle. I mean, why? Why would we ever choose fear? And fear, again, it's everything negative. It's judgment, it's resentment, it's anything you can think of that doesn't feel good. And the reason that we choose that is not even because we are choosing it. We think we're victims. We think that this is just a natural response. Oh, this person did whatever. I'm supposed to be angry. I'm supposed to be upset. And then I put out all this energy. And then what happens? I break a glass. I spill something on somebody else, because water, liquids are a pattern in reality that correspond to what? Emotions. So if you start to see, for example, in your life, your shower head explodes, your toilet starts overflowing, water things happening in your reality, pay attention, because there's emotions that are trying to come up, and you're either suppressing them, which is causing that pressurization for it to be reflected back to you through the synchronicities of reality, or it's somebody else that you're related to and you're feeling their emotions come into your reality. And that's the level of clarity we can have when we start to see these patterns within patterns. And every single time we choose unconditional love over fear, our vibration goes up when our vibration goes up, the reality reflects it back to us. Then we know that we're safe and we can choose unconditional love again. So we choose it again. And then it's reflected back to us. We know we're safe. So it creates this upward exponential path where the more we do it, the more we feel safe doing it. And it gets to the point where we don't even choose fear anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, to not choose fear on in a regular, consistent basis, to the extent of not judging people, to the extent of, treating everyone with kindness and respect, that only took me, and everybody's going to be different. We're all on these different paths. That only took me about 2 to 3 months writing love over fear on my hand. And every time I got a negative thought, I would look at that. And I'd say, no, I'm going to choose love here. I'm going to choose unconditional love. And every time, if it was a negative thought, I would accept it. I would forgive it. And then I would show it unconditional love, and I would create a new dialogue. I'm not worthy of this. No, I am. I'm beautiful. I'm worthy. I accept who I am, and I love myself. And not only am I worthy for this, I'm worthy for this other even greater thing. And I'm going to go prove it to myself. And man, it's just life becomes magical.
Yeah. I love that you outlined it like that. You're a lot like me, where I become extremely vigilant about, getting this concept. And as I was studying the Course in Miracles, I still am studying. I never stopped studying the Course in Miracles. It talks about love and forgiveness, and how when you do practice love, you do extend love, and you do forgive, that it saves us time. It saves us like 1,000 years. And I know you've talked about time a lot, and I would love for you to kind of riff on time. And one of the things that, when I heard you talking about how you wrote it on your hand, love or fear, choose love over fear, the Course in Miracles, it and the Way of Mastery, they both say that the use of time is to learn how to love. The use of time is for forgiveness. So it makes it extremely easy for me, because like you said in the beginning, if you want it, right, I am willing. That's all I want. All I want is love. All I want is God. So I am willing to spend all my time, forgiving and learning to love. And I think that that's where a lot of people feel like they have to spend their time doing other things. So I'd love for you to riff on that for a little bit.
Sure. So, for example, oh gosh. For example, I have a really good friend, and I'm obviously not going to use names, but I have a really good friend, and this individual is going through something where they are putting a lot of effort, a lot of time, and honestly, a lot of concern and a lot of worry into their job, what they do for a living. And there's this theme that the universe is presenting to them. It's very, very clear, like very powerfully clear, of letting go of that masculine doing, and being more into the being and the receiving of unconditional love. And these opportunities are arising for this person to experience this love. But it's like every day they're so focused on their work that they're blocking that love out in a certain way. And I haven't even like really confronted them about it, because it's not like they're doing it in a way that's detrimental in any way necessarily, but it's just interesting to me, because in my experience, if I was put in that scenario, I would, for example, let go. I would let go of the job because I'm feeling stress from it. I'm feeling like underfulfilled. And then I would just trust and know that whatever cafe I walk into, that next alignment, that better job will be waiting for me, just waiting in a conversation over coffee with some person I don't even know yet. And that's what I would do. But in this situation, this beautiful individual, they don't feel fully prepared for that yet. They don't feel like they fully switched over all those programs from the conditional love into unconditional love. So they're focusing on their job. But here's the thing. Everything is a reflection of us. So if we're sacrificing our happiness for a job that makes us unhappy, then we're telling ourselves we deserve to be unhappy. And then if everything's a reflection of us, then our fulfillment, our energetic fulfillment, our abundance, our pay, uh, our connections, um, our soul family, all of that is being blocked off because what we're doing is we're putting out this vibration that I don't deserve to be happy. So if I'm saying to the universe, I don't deserve to be happy because I'm constantly choosing to go to this job that makes me unhappy, then I'm blocking out new friendships. I'm blocking out new, romantic relationships. I'm blocking out new jobs that would actually be beneficial. So if anybody's out there, especially watching this, and they're thinking like, well, this stuff, it's a little bit woo woo and maybe there's science to it, but it takes a lot of time to learn this stuff and integrate it. I'm just going to say right now to all those viewers, I love you, but bullshit. And here's why. Because there's 77-page book that you can read in one sitting on the toilet if you take a while to go number 2 and figure out the secrets to the universe. And then all of this will be in your hand, the coming days and weeks. Yeah. So, and think of all the time that you'll save on karmic relationships, all the time you'll save on karmic jobs that are not your end all be all job. It's just to teach you what you're worth, that you're worth more than that. You don't need to do these things. You don't need to go to meetings and talk to people you don't want to talk to. You don't need to sacrifice your dreams and your goals to go be a nurse or to go be a lawyer or whatever it is. Be who you are. And that is love. True, genuine, unconditional, universal love. And that version of you will have everything that you've ever wanted. It will be in those golden timelines. It will take you to your wildest dreams. And that I can't emphasize that more. Not only have I gone from essentially being a nobody, smoking weed and playing video games every day of my life, distracting myself, I went from that to being someone that speaks on stage and is bumping elbows with some big, big names in consciousness. Yeah. And I couldn't have even imagined that this would be my life a couple of years ago. And now I'm seeing the trajectory. I'm seeing that it can even get bigger and better. And, we are going to change the world with this information. The second that unity theory goes mainstream in the same way that the theory of relativity went mainstream, then this world will experience regular magic. The vibration, the collective that's what we were going to go to. So I'm gonna tell about this because
I'm so glad you opened up the can.
Yeah, we opened up the can a little bit. So how is reality created with oneness? If we all have the same access to all of the power in the universe, then the level of the power that we access is determined by our vibration. So if let's say everybody on the world vibrating low, then it's going to be all those vibrations added up, divided, and that average will be the collective reality that we experience. And that vibration, if everybody's on low vibration, it's going to be war. It's going to be, famine. It's going to be struggle, abuse, rape, all these horrible, horrible things. But then if you take, let's say, 10% of that population, and then you refine their consciousness and you raise their vibration because of the innate power of a higher vibration, it's an exponential shift. So you get 10% of that population, they exponentially shift so that, most of the vibrations in the reality are way down here, but then that 10%, it's like way up here. And then they have all that energy given to them to influence the rest of the vibration. So instead of everybody being low down here, that 10% brings the collective vibration up here. And that means that 10% existing is now causing war to be less frequent. It's causing people to come together more harmony in reality. And then when we say these 10% of the population, or maybe it gets to 20%, 25%, gets so high that essentially it invalidates the rest of the vibrations down here. Like we get so high, we're so awakened that we're literally flying, we're literally glowing, we're bioluminescent, we look like gods and goddesses. The rest of the beings down here, they can't be here anymore because we have used our free will to vibrate so high that the authority is ultimately 100% given to us, meaning that there's no more war allowed anymore. There's no more fighting allowed. There's no more abuse allowed. And they all have to come up to us. And that's what we're going through. That's what the age of Aquarius is. And that's how we're creating New Earth. And it's really simple. Just be unconditional love. And the more that you are that unconditional love, the more power you have, the more abundance, the more success, the more viewers you'll get. This is the time, and that has been prophesied, where those that came first will come last. And those that came last will come first. Why? Because the whole system up until now has been built on lies. So the more you lie, the more you succeed. But that's in a faulty system built on lies called the Matrix. Now we're exiting the Matrix. We're living outside of it in this exo matrix, heaven on earth society. And the more that we rise, the more that we all succeed together. And it can't be stopped because that vibration is so high. Another quick thing to note is that since we all have access to the same amount of power, anybody can do, for example, if they wanted to, they could do exactly what I'm doing. They could discover the secrets of the universe. They could go and test it on themselves. They could be an example. They could be, truly a leader of what it looks like to live in this life. Anybody can do this. I was a nobody. I had nothing going for me in my life, really. And here I'm achieving my dreams. Yeah. So my whole mission is to bring that awareness, that safety, that space to everyone willing to even explore it so that we can all rise together.
Thank you for that. That was so beautiful. And I love how you said anybody can do this. Like, that's my story. I was in a job and I was not happy, and I actually wasn't brave enough to let go, but I was praying and I got fired. And because of that, now I'm here holding this platform, which has been my dream for a while now, and allowing people like you and other leaders in this space who have cracked the codes or who have wisdom to offer. So I love that. I know we've been chatting for a while, and I have a couple of questions that I want to ask all my guests. So is there anything else that you want to say before I get to those questions that you want listeners to know?
Not so much, other than the main thing is the only way we can change the world is through consciousness. And the only way we can do that is through awareness. And to raise awareness on unity theory is, to me, the number one, most simple, easiest way to completely shift reality on this planet. So if there's anybody out there that resonates with my story, please, please, please share it. And know that I'm not holding this from anybody behind a paywall. If anybody wants to read my book, just go to my website, thecrimsoneagle.com, and download it for free. I receive love donations because we all need to get by in this world, but it's not about the money for me. It's not about the fame. It's not about the success. To me, all those things are secondary to what I am here to do. And that's to be myself and to show the world that they can do this too. They can use the power of the I am, of the universe. They can reach their full potential. And all they needed really was somebody to show them that anybody can do it. So that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And I'll put the link to your website in the comments or in the description so that everyone can access that just by watching this video. Okay, so the first question is, it's a big one. And I know we've come at a scientific angle, but I would love to know, how would you, or how do you define God?
Okay. So that is what I would consider a trick question. And the reason why is because God ultimately is a concept. But if I were to say a few things about God, one thing I would say is that God is the singularity. God God is the ultimate truth. And that is that everything you could ever imagine is happening right now. And the truth about that is that God is not God and it's not goddess. It's one thing that would be both simultaneously. And on a further note, if we're going to get specific about masculine and feminine energy, then I would say that we are all goddess before we are God. And the reasoning for that is because goddess is the infinite timeline sphere. Goddess is everything that's not happening now. It's infinite potential. In light itself, it's reflected as the wave version of light. But light is also a particle. And that particle is the singular compared to the infinite. And that particle is the masculine energy. That's the left brain. That's the linear, the logical, the scientific, the mathematic. And if we were to distinguish between what is goddess, the infinite potential is goddess and the singular is God. But guess what? You can have a wave and not have a particle, but you cannot have a particle without a wave, which means that goddess is the true highest expression of the divine. And that's why I wear red. Red is the color of the divine feminine. And I'm an emissary here on behalf of the divine feminine to hold space for the hearts of all women, of all men carrying the divine feminine energy within them so that we can all rise together. And when we figure out this pattern, we can qualify it. Why? Because we are all girls before we're boys in our mother's womb. We are all XX before we switch to XY and become men. And with that being said, that's really empowering for women. One, and to know that the true God is goddess. But two, at the end of the day, at the highest level, when we integrate all scientific truths, it comes back to that singularity. And it's actually on my book. This is a common, if I can show you, this is a common symbol, that circle with the dot inside, for the sun or for the universe. And to me, it's both. It really is both, because the circle is the womb. That's the goddess. And within the circle, because the goddess is like an egg, it ends the age-old riddle. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg has to exist in order for a chicken to ever manifest.
Right.
So she is the egg, and then God is that projection, the projection of the light, the singular moment that's happening. And so that's a really beautiful symbol to me. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is how reality works. This is how we exist. And if God is the singularity of all things, and we are interconnected to that, then we cannot not be God. We have to be God. We have to be goddess. We have to be both. And what I've experienced in my own personal journey, I didn't expect to share this, is that when we view ourselves as both, literally, and I mean quite literally, looking at yourself as both sexes at the same time, that's when we really start to align our consciousness within. That's when we start to have internal divine union. And I know this because when this process started happening for me, I started to literally see divine union tarot cards and all that stuff started flying out at me. And I had this experience where I smoked a little bit of cannabis to get into that meditative state. And I was guided by my full potential self, my higher, what I call my higher, or I call my higher self, my full potential self. So my full potential self guided me to really know that I am goddess before I am God. With that explanation I just gave you, I had that epiphany while I had this session smoking. And I got that download, and I started to view myself literally as a woman. I viewed myself having breasts. I viewed myself as having a yoni instead of a lingam. And I literally had such a profound experience. I was a woman. I was a man at the same time. I could feel what we would consider, the the sexual feelings on both my lingam and what I was perceiving in that meditation as my yoni. Like I literally had a womb and everything. And in that energy, I felt the most beautiful, blissful experience of my entire life. And I felt like I literally, I can't say it any other way to make it the most clear. It felt like I was having sex with myself. And this is what it's like to have internal divine union. And when we enter in that divine union, one, that's when everything in our life is just going to be coming straight for our 0 point. It's all coming to help us. It's all coming to support us. Even our shadows will come and support us, even if it looks like they're not supporting us, but everything they do will help us eventually. And in this space, I've seen nothing but magic. So it takes a little bit of deprogramming to get out of the idea of like, the whole, and not all of the trans community at all is toxic, but there are some very intensely toxic concepts to try and lower the consciousness of that group of people in our reality. And there's a lot of negativity around that in our fields we need to release and let go of, to really realize we're both. My hologram is a man, but I am a woman as much as I am a man, because if I didn't have those energies within me, I couldn't even exist. So that's just a little tangential explanation.
Yeah. I think we could do a whole episode on masculine and feminine. And I just loved your perspective and how, as I was listening to you, I just felt the wholeness of the yin and yang, like, and that the wholeness, the oneness that is God. So thank you so much for that. The next question I have for you, I think we've already touched on this in various different ways, but never just asking this question outright. So what would you say the purpose of life is?
I would say the purpose of life is to be, because to be is the only thing that accounts for everything that's happening, for all the infinite realities, all the infinite timelines. At the end of the day, though we are infinite, and infinity truly, if it is infinite, it cannot be fully explored. There is a way to kind of go back to these timelines. For example, we're living through this experience now, but time really doesn't exist, which means we're here for eternity. So eternity would get really, really boring if we had nothing to do for eternity. So the way I look at it is we're on this circular path. We see the circle, we see the sphere in almost all native traditions, all indigenous traditions, and spirituality. And what this means is that we're on a circular path. We're always going in circles. That's what we're doing in the universe. And in our reality as a human, we're on a circular spiral path. So we start off on these lower spirals where it's like, oh, we have, I don't know, we have an issue with intimacy, right? And then we come to a higher level, and then we have this person that really wants to make love with us, but we're not ready for that. And then it gets to the point where we're about to make love with someone, but then we get so stressed out that like we, make a really embarrassing mistake or something. And these, on this spiral path, the lessons will get more and more difficult until we finally learn them. And that's why I recommend integrating unity theory into your reality, so you don't need to go, like we were saying, those detour timelines to keep learning the same thing. And then with that being said, since we're on that spiral path, the greater success we have on the higher levels, we will experience even greater success. But on the spiral path, we're adding to our toolkits. We're growing, we're gaining more knowledge on how to address these things at higher levels. So it's really the number one way to have a fun experience, an engaging experience, even if it's not necessarily fun. And the way that I see reality is in infinity and eternity. We probably decide to live as Isaac Mars endlessly. We go through this revolving door of, oh, here's Isaac Mars's story, and we're all one. So we're living through my experience. And then we go through someone else's experience and someone else endlessly, endlessly, endlessly. And we go through all the different timelines that could ever happen. And then we ultimately come back to day one of Isaac Mars's story. But in this version, Isaac decides to have brown eyes instead of blue eyes or something. And we start it all over. And ultimately, this is what we would do in eternity. And that is what I just shared with you is a profoundly abstract universal view. That's like going as far away from a human perspective as possible. But that's essentially what we would do.
Right. I followed you. I get it.
Okay.
I loved it. Okay. And the last question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of you before your awakening or anytime at all, just a younger version of you, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
It would be a question. And if I could share this wisdom by offering a clue as to why the question is important, I would do that to make sure that my younger self could understand what I'm saying. But the question is very simple. Is judgment of the self and the other worth perpetuating a life of suffering and pain? And if I could figure out what I'm explaining to myself as the younger version of me, I would realize that if I can remove judgment from my dialogue with myself, if I can remove judgment with the way that I interact and communicate with everything and everyone else in my reality, everything fearful's gone. Poof. Yeah. It's all gone. Yeah. Because I'm not judging things as good or bad. So if I can remove that judgment, then for example, those that are still stuck in that weaponized victim consciousness, they don't realize that the very things they claim to hate, the very things they claim to fear, is exactly what they're recreating. Because what we judge, what we are, and there's a third one, I can't think of it right now, maybe it'll come up later, but what we judge and what we are is what we create and what we attract. So if we're a victim and we have been abused, and then we say, oh, our abusers deserve to die, they deserve to go to hell, what we're saying is that we haven't learned the lesson. Because the whole lesson, everything, it's about unconditional love. So the universe says, oh, you haven't learned the lesson, you're supposed to love them. Okay, well, here are more abusers. Here are more narcissists. Here are more, competitors to try and step on you and make your life miserable. So let's get on it now. Let's focus on how we can transform these things now so that we don't have to deal with them when they get bigger through the spiral path. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Absolutely. I love that question. I'm curious if you can repeat it. I can try if you can't, but that was amazing. The one question you said was, is judgment of self
mm-hmm.
and judgment of other. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Is judgment of self and judgment of the other worth perpetuating a reality of pain and suffering? Because if we can delete judgment, if fear and love is too much for you, just focus on judgment. If you can judge nobody, including yourself, you will become unconditional love. It will be the natural byproduct of what happens.
I love that. Thank you so much. This conversation has been so amazing. There's so many topics that I would love to dive into with you. So maybe we'll bookmark those for future episodes. And just thank you so much for everything that you're doing, for being an author, being a speaker, being a spiritual guide, and giving your time and your wisdom to all of us so we can create a world where everyone feels heard, loved, seen, understood, and connected. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina, for being on the same wavelength and for following your heart, your path, choosing to be courageous, and know that you are so inspiring to many, including myself, because in the patterns within patterns for thousands of years, women and all female energy has been oppressed and suppressed. So for you to be walking your path and to be choosing courage over fear, it's just so mind-blowingly inspirational. And I really appreciate you because you're showing me that Gaia is ready. You're showing me that humanity is ready for this. And that's the most heart-opening, exciting thing that I can feel in this now moment. So that means a lot. And for those of you watching this video, if you want to connect with me more, check out my website and my book at thecrimsoneagle.com. Find me on Instagram or YouTube at the Crimson Eagle. And then you can friend request me or, follow me if you want on Facebook at Isaac Mars. And it's been an honor and a pleasure again.
Thank you so much.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.